life.
Voices from the ghetto. When I hear Gil, I'm a pause.
I just raise my own pause.
I just raise
my own pause. Okay. To be honest.
Hey, it's only happening right here on Caribbean Insight. We're chatting with singing Sandra, the Calypso monarch of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago for the year 2003. So let's go to the videotape.
I lay down in meditation. I took a journey spiritually. My eyes beheld a vision shone clearly in front of me. Well, in the vision I saw an old man slowly beating a drum, humming a melody that was strange to me. Then he called me and said, Sandra, come. He arose and he showed me a country, beautiful everywhere, a land of endless bounty, and the riches beyond compare. There was enough for everybody, for all their material needs. But alas, when the old man showed me, my people, they were all overpowered with greed. And the old man beat his drum. The old man beat his drum. He said, take this melody, girl, go to your country, warn them of the wrath to come, and if you hear him, bye-bye, revelation time. This is revelation. This is revelation. I want them of the wrath. You're gonna get on them of the road to come. Leaders were fighting each other. They were tearing the people apart. Friends who used to live happy together, now hatred filling their hearts. Neighbors were cursing neighbors, whole villages in mayhem. I heard they were listening deceitful leaders who were preaching for doctrine to them. Look, compassion went out of the window. Deviousness reigned instead. Morality was low, cause the people were spiritually dead. But the old man beat it drum. The old man beat it drum. He said, take this melody, girl, go to your country, warn them of the wrath. And if you hear, warn them of the wrath. You're gonna get revelation. Revelation. You know what he tell me? He said, go tell it on the mountain, over the hills, and everywhere. Oh, tell it on the mountain. The old man beat his drum. The youths were all in a quandary, no sense of direction. They lost all hope cause they just can't cope. They're already yet, but they're gone. They had no respect for their elders, no respect for themselves also. Their spirits were all in tatters and reading an all-time low. Then I hear them cussing the system, they're cussing the leaders too. But they were raping, stealing, shooting and looting, but they all had nothing else to do. The old man beat his drum. The old man beat his drum. He said, take this melody, girl, go to your country, warn them of the road to come on and warn them of the road to come. You're gonna get revelation time. This is revelation. This is revelation. Warn them of the road to come. talk to your spiritual leaders. Tell them get on their knees and pray. To get rid of all these karmas that driving good spirits away. Then you tell them, talk to your fellow Calypsonians. Tell them stop the shame and disgrace. Encouraging people to get on and jump up and mash up the place. But behold, I saw the sunrise coming over the mountain range. The old man said that is a symbol of hope if people get serious and change. But the old man beat it drum. The old man beat it drum. He said, take this melody, girl, go to your country, warn them of the road. And if you warn them of the road to come. Leaders were fighting each other. They were tearing the people apart. Friends who used to live happy together, now hatred filling their hearts. Neighbors were cursing neighbors, whole villages in mayhem. I heard they were listening deceitful leaders who were preaching for doctrine to them. Look, compassion went out of the window. Deviousness reigned instead. Morality was low, 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 but the people were spiritually dead. But the old man beat it drum. The old man beat it drum. He said, take this melody, girl, go to your country, warn them of the wrath. And if you hear, warn them of the wrath. Revelation, now what he tell me? He said, go tell it on the mountain, over the hills, and everywhere. Oh, tell it on the mountain. The old man beat his drum. The youths were all in a quandary, no sense of direction. They lost all hope cause they just can't cope. They're already yet, but they're gone. They have no respect for their elders, no respect for themselves also. Their spirits were all in tatters and reading an all-time low. Then I hear them cussing the system, they're cussing the leaders too. But they were raping, stealing, shooting and looting, but they all had nothing else to do. The old man beat his drum. The old man beat his drum. He said, take this melody, girl, go to your country, warn them of the road to come and warn them of the road to come. We're gonna get revelation time. This is revelation. This is revelation. Warn them of the road to come. He said, talk to your spiritual leaders. Tell them get on their knees and pray. To get rid of all these karmas that driving good spirits away. Then you tell them, talk to your fellow Calypsonians. Tell them stop the shame and disgrace. Encouraging people to get on and jump up and mash up the place. But behold, I saw the sunrise coming over the mountain range. The old man said that is a symbol of hope if your people get serious and change. But the old man beat the drum. The old man beat the drum. He said, take this melody, girl, go to your country, warn them of the wrath. And if you do,
I know you guys feel.
The old man, the prophetic voice, singing Sandra, the prophetic tradition, the mountain top. Dr. King, the night before he died, also went to the mountain top, prophesizing. The old man beat the drum. A little bit of the Shango and mix up with the comfort and the Jamaican Pocomania. All that we brought with us. All that we brought with us. When we came across the Middle Passage against our wishes. But the drums are still beating. The drums are still beating. The drums are still beating as they must. As they must. The old man beat the drum. Good evening to you and welcome. Welcome to Politics 101. We're not giving up. We're trying to get it right here. We're trying to get it right. We're trying to get it right. We're trying to get it right. We're not giving up. Here we go. The prophetic voice of singing Sandra there. The old man beat the drum. Go tell it on the mountain. Revelation time. Revelation time. Good evening to you and welcome to Politics 101 tonight, Wednesday night. We are here again, coming to watch ourselves, look ourselves in the face, look ourselves in the eye, and speak to the realities of our time. Not speaking in forked tongues, speaking truth. Please share the live, please share the link. We're on, and tonight there are a few things we want to talk about. Tonight there are a few things we want to talk about. A few things that we must talk about. We must talk about. The old man beat the drum, singing Sandra, taking us deep into ourselves there, asking questions as always, asking questions, and giving answers. Please share the link. Please share the link. We are in trouble, some people say. Professor Rex Nettleford would answer that we are always in trouble because we are trying to build a new society. We are trying to build a new society. And so we are constantly having to face questions and to answer those questions, difficult questions. And one of the reasons we elect leaders is that they have to confront the questions of our time. The questions of our time. I am following very closely our government's positions that they're taking on domestic issues and regional issues and global issues. Our president recently met with President Trump of the United States of America, along with the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, and the question of Cuba came up. And I'm noting our government's position. Our president said that the status quo in Cuba must go. And I'm asking, what about the status quo in Guyana? What are the sins of the status quo in Cuba that it must go? And what are the sins of the status quo in Guyana? That's my question to my president. What about the status quo in Guyana, President Ali? What about the status quo in Guyana, President Ali? I want to know. You see, when you take positions, you have to be able to defend those positions. You have to be able to explain those positions. You have to be able to explain those positions to your countrymen and women. I will let Black Stallions introduce us tonight. We heard from Singing Sandra, the old man beat the drum. Kofi Kwayana, young AUC Kwayana. He loves that calypso. The old man beat the drum. Good evening, brother UC. Standing strong, standing tall. Our mentor, know that name, AUC Kwayana. Know that name, AUC Kwayana. The old man beat the drum. The old man beat the drum. Let Black Stallion talk for us, and then we're going to talk on the other side.
The time of federation, the whole thing in confusion. Caricom and Carifta, but somehow a spelling disaster. Mr. West Indian politician, I mean, you went to big institution, and how come you can't unite 7 million? When a West Indian unity, I know it's very easy. If you only rapture your people and tell them like me, there is one race from the same place, that make the same trip on the same ship. And so we must put one common intention for a better life in the region, for we women and we children. That must be the ambition of the Caribbean man, the Caribbean man, the Caribbean. They say that the Federation was imported quite from England, and they're going and come and Carifta with the true West Indian flavor. Since Carifta started running, morning, noon, and night, all I hear is money speech, them like ministers giving. But I say no send of money, good for my unity. Now first of all, your people need their identity to be one race from the same place. That make the same trip. So we must push one common intention for a better life in the region. For we women and we children. That must be the ambition of the Caribbean. The Caribbean man, the Caribbean man. Caricom is wasting time. The whole Caribbean gone blind. You don't know from where you're coming. Then you can't fly where you're going. Some want to be communist. Brother, some want to be socialist. And one set of religion so add to the foolishness. But look, a man who don't know his history, he have formed no unity. Tell me how could a man who don't know his roots from his own ideology? One race,
Caribbean man,
from the same place,
Caribbean man,
I think the same trip,
Caribbean man,
on the same ship.
Caribbean man.
So we must push one common intention for a better life in the region, for we women and we children. That must be the ambition of the Caribbean, the Caribbean man, the Caribbean man. The Federation done dead, going to bed, but the cult of the Rastafarian spreading through the Caribbean. Rastas now in Grenada, Rastas now in St. Lucia, but to run yes, you get in pressure. If the Rastafari movement spreading and Caribbean dying slow, then there's something them Rastas on that. Positive race from the same
Caribbean man,
I pick the same trip
Caribbean man,
on the same ship.
Caribbean man.
So we must push one common intention for a better life in the region. For we women and we children. That must be the ambition of the Caribbean. The Caribbean man, the Caribbean man.
We come on the same ship. I want you all listen to Dr. Leroy Callis, the black man, Black Stalin. Very, very insightful. And it's taking us where we want to go tonight. Taking us where we want to go tonight. Stalin is arguing that Caribbean integration is more than politics. That Caribbean integration has to do with the identity of the Caribbean people because we come on the same ship from the same place and we must have one common intention for we women and we children. The thesis of Caribbean integration he's arguing is not political and economic. Those are consequences. He said we are Caribbean because of identity. You see, that cost people like me. David is always into identity politics. He always into race. You see, we didn't create race. We didn't create it. We have to fight race as a Caribbean people. We have to fight against racism to maintain our identity. And what Stalin is arguing is what Clive Thomas and that whole generation of what they call the New World academics argue. They said, look, this integration, this Caribbean integration is more than just politics. It has to do with our identity as a people. Dr. Ralph Gonzalez refers to the Caribbean as a Caribbean civilization. He's saying that we are more than just a collection of islands. We are a people who have developed an identity, a story, and we have created things in this world. And you see, if you're guided by that notion of Caribbean integration, then you see the world differently. Black Stallion is insightful. Caribbean integration is not primarily economic and political, it's cultural.
Children, that must be the ambition of the Caribbean man, the Caribbean man, the Caribbean. They say that the Federation was imported quite from England, and they're going and forming a character with that true West Indian flavor. This character started running for noon and night. All I hear is money speech, them prime ministers giving. But I say no set of money, good for my unity. Now first of all, your people need their identity to be one race from the same place.
No set of money can form a unity. The first thing, your people have to have their identity. Identity, what do you identify with? If you're saying that you're Guyanese, if you're saying you're Caribbean, what is it that identifies you and separates you from others? When you say, I am Caribbean, I am Guyanese, you're saying, I am not something else. I am. No set of money can form a unity. The Black Stallion makes reference there to federation. Between 1958 and 1962, 10 Caribbean countries came together to form one union, one country. It was called the West Indian Federation. Guyana was not part of it. Dr. Jagan, who I have tremendous respect for and who I will urge you all here to have tremendous respect for, because his contribution to our country is enormous. But when it came to the federation, when it came to Caribbean integration, he felt that it had to do with elections and numbers. And so he did not take Guyana into the West Indies Federation because he said his supporters, Indian Guyanese, would become a minority in a West Indian Federation. And he would not be able to win elections. I am paraphrasing his position here. For him, Caribbean integration was not about identity. It was about politics. And Sidney King, Rory Westmus, Martin Carter, Keith Carter, and others who had not gone with Burnham when Burnham left the PPP in 55. In 1956, they left on the question of Caribbean integration because for Sidney King, he's still alive. He used to Guyana. Caribbean integration was about identity, not who got more votes and who got less votes. Sidney King got it right. Jagan got it wrong. On this question of Caribbean integration, how do you define our Caribbeanness? Black Stalin is saying no amount of money. What he's saying there is that integration, our integration cannot be premised on economics or politics. It has to be premised on our identity. Who are we? We come on the same ship. 1979, he sang that calypso and won the Calypso Crown of that year. And he had an argument with the great Dr. Eric Williams. Because Dr. Williams, Trinidad Prime Minister, Trinidadian, West Indian patriot, who wrote Capitalism and Slavery, arguing that British and European capitalism and development were premised on the returns they got from sugar in the Caribbean, capitalism and slavery. That what we call European capitalism, the capital for that capitalism came from slavery in Guyana and the Caribbean. This is Dr. Eric Williams. And so he's arguing with Stalin when Stalin said, we come on the same ship from the same place. Trinidad Prime Minister, who ought to have understood Stalin, he said, well, Black Stalin, what about others who didn't come on that ship? But we all came on the ship, Dr. Williams. Black Stalin argued with him. The Africans came on slave ships. The East Indians and Portuguese and Chinese came on indentureship ships. And the place that we all come from is not just the physical place of Africa or India or Madeira, but we come from civilizations. That's the place Black Stalin is talking about. And we brought those civilizations to the Caribbean. That is why Dr. Ralph Gonzalez referred to the Caribbean as a civilization, because we were civilizations before we came here. The great civilizations of Africa, Mali and Chad and Songhai, the great civilization of India, the great civilization. We brought civilization here to the Caribbean, and the native indigenous people already had their civilization here. The Mayans and the Aztecs and the Incas, the Wapisianas. And so the coming together of those civilizations create the Caribbean as a civilization. Our identity as a Caribbean people has to be based on the fusion of those civilizations. From Cuba and Jamaica in the north, right down to the south. We are a Caribbean civilization, and our Caribbeanness is more than economics and politics. It's about a shared identity. The Caribbean identity. So Dr. Jagan got it wrong. For him, integration was about politics and party politics. And for Guyana, God bless him, integration was about identity and our shared civilization. I want you all to get me right, because what we are doing is teaching. We are a civilization. And you may have heard these things, but we are going to learn them as a people. That is why you all invested in people like myself to read books and sit in classrooms so we can articulate our shared history and put them in the public space as I'm doing here. Dr. Jagan got integration wrong, says Black Stallion. No set of money, no set of votes can form a unity. You got to rap to you people about their identity. I am happy. I am grateful to be a disciple of AUC Guyana. There's an exchange between Guyana and Jagan. Jagan's address to the 1956 PPP conference in New Amsterdam. And Guyana's response to him, it was published by University of Puerto Rico, in which Guyana argues for integration, left the PPP on the question of Caribbean integration. Because Guyana is arguing, like Black Stallion, whether we are East Indian or African or Chinese or Portuguese, we all come on that ship. Africans came against their will. Indians came largely of their own choosing. Amerindians came largely of their own choosing, but we all came. Y'all remember that book we used to read when we were little boys of my generation? The people who came, we all came to this place. That is why we are Caribbean. Jagan did not define Caribbean integration in terms of the people who came. He defined it narrowly about the interests of Indian Guyanese. From Cuba and Haiti in the north, and I'm talking about Cuba and Haiti, because you see, in 1804, when the Haitian Revolution eventually triumphed, it was a 20-year-old war. And the Haitian Revolution triumphed in 1804. At that time, Haiti was the most prosperous sugar colony, making money for France. And after the revolution, Cuba became the most prosperous sugar colony. Talk to me. Let's talk tonight. So Cuba and Haiti are foundation to our Caribbean integration. Jagan got it wrong. And I'm not saying this to denigrate Jagan. Politicians get it wrong all the time. Jagan had a narrow definition of integration. Guyana had a broader, more cultural definition of Caribbean unity. That Caribbean integration is not just based on economics and politics. More importantly, it is based on culture. Your identity, your worldview is a mix of your gods and your ancestors. Your relationship to the land and the water and the air. That is why we say agriculture. How do you produce food? The culture that goes into the tilling of the soil. Talk to me tonight. Talk to me tonight. We are going. The federation broke up because Alexander Bustamante a mulatto in Jamaica. Like Jagan, he saw integration in money terms. He felt that if we became one Caribbean country, Jamaica, which in numbers had the most prosperous economy among the countries in the Federation, Jamaica had broken with sugar. As Takumo Gunse said the other night in Buxton, King Sugar destroyed us, torn us asunder, tear us asunder. Today we are dealing with King Oil. I'm coming there, I'm getting there. You see, Jamaica broke with sugar. And it had moved into bauxite and tourism and banana. But the majority of its resources came from bauxite, calcined bauxite. Jamaica, Guyana, and Suriname had the most of the calcined bauxite, which was in demand because they needed bauxite for warships and all the other warplanes and so on. And so Jamaica was able to garner a lot of resources from bauxite. And on paper, it had the most thriving economy. Never mind the resources that came in from the bauxite went to at most 20 families. But in those days, the Jamaican dollar was stronger than the American dollar. For $1 American, it was 75 cents Jamaican money. Jamaica had a stronger dollar than the US. And so Bustamante said that if we became one country, all the people from Guyana and Trinidad and the rest of the Caribbean would flock Jamaica. And he didn't want that. So they called the vote in Jamaica along party lines. And the supporters of the Jamaica Labour Party, led by Bustamante, voted for Jamaica to get out of the Federation. Bustamante is defining Federation narrowly. The leader of the PNP in Jamaica, a mulatto just like Bustamante. In fact, they were cousins. Norman Manley, that's Michael Manley's daddy. He took the opposite position. He took the Guyana position. That integration was more than just politics and economics. It was about our shared identity. Bustamante is taking the Jagan position. Jagan didn't take us into the Federation, didn't take Guyana, and Bustamante took Jamaica out of the Federation. Let me repeat myself. Jagan didn't take Guyana into the West Indian nation that was being put together. And Bustamante took Jamaica out of the West Indian nation that was being put together in the form of the Federation. Guyana argued that Guyana ought to be in the Federation and parted with Jagan on that issue. Norman Manley took the different position and campaigned for Jamaica to remain in the Federation. By a slight majority, Bustamante view won. Dr. Eric Williams was to say that 1 from 10 leaves naught. That since Jamaica had the most thriving economy of the Federation countries, Jamaica's exit in effect meant that the attempt at a West Indian nation was stymied. 1 from 10 leaves nothing. And so we went to independence, not as a West Indian nation. We went to independence as mini nations, Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago in 1962, Barbados and Guyana in 1966, and the others followed. Haiti had been independent before. Cuba had been independent before. We are one family. After the breakup of the Federation, the dream of integration did not end. We moved from the Federation to the Caribbean Free Trade Area, CARIFTA, that Black Stalin talked about. We had the Little Eight. Those were the 8 Eastern Caribbean countries. Jamaica pulled out. Trinidad said 1 from 10 need not. The Little Eight, the Eastern Caribbean countries and Barbados, almost made it. They are now what we call the OECS. Although Barbados is not part of the OECS. We had CARIFTA. Burnham comes to power in 1964. And Burnham takes a different view to Jagan. Burnham took the Guyana view that our place is in Caribbean integration. At one time, Guyana and Barbados and St. Kitts almost became one nation. We moved from CARIFTA to CARICOM in 1973 with the signing of the Treaty of Chaguaramas. Burnham, Eric Williams, Michael Manley, following in the footsteps of his daddy, Errol Barrow, following in the footsteps of Grantley Adams. And they signed the Treaty of Chaguaramas, creating CARICOM. It was a limited union because by that time we were in individual independent countries. But they did what they had to do in 1973. The headquarters of CARICOM was created and built in Guyana and still is in Guyana. Burnham takes a different position from Jagan. He integrates Guyana into the Caribbean family in a formal way. I am not arguing here tonight whether Burnham was better than Jagan. I don't get into that kind of trivial nonsense. I am saying here are the positions. We have 3 of our founding brothers. I don't like the idea of founding fathers. 3 of our founding brothers. Sidney King, Forbes Burnham, Cheddy Jagan. 2 of them takes a broad panoramic view of Caribbean integration. 1 of them takes a narrow view. I'm moving. 1973. CARICOM comes into being. A limited union based on economics and politics. Burnham argued and sponsored Carifesta in 1972, preceding the 1973. So Burnham is thinking about culture as a way of holding our Caribbean together. The culture that Black Stalin talks about. It is that thinking that gave rise to Carifesta in 1972. Teach ourselves and teach our children. Let me fast forward from 1972 and 1973. We're not so fast. Because in 1973, something important happened. You see, when Guyana and Barbados and Trinidad and Jamaica and Tobago and St. Lucia, and when we became sovereign countries, independent countries, we entered a world that was not created for us. The New World Order was created after the Second World War. We were still colonies. And they created that New World Order for the so-called victors of the war. And we became independent in that world. And that world order was hostile to the notion of fundamental change. Last night I talked about revolution, meaning fundamental change, upturning an old order and replacing it with a new order. A revolution is not something that happens every day. A revolution is broader than the physical geographical space that the change occurs. In an age of revolution, in the 18th century, we had the French Revolution, the American Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, and the Bourbis Revolution, 1763, even preceding the 1776 American Revolution and the French Revolution, when Kofi and his brothers and sisters took over the colony of Bourbis for over a year. It was a revolution. They held the colony for a year. That age of revolution. The battle cry of liberty, 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 freedom. And so in 1959, when Cuban, led by Fidel Castro and Che Guevara and others, took Cuba from the control of the powerful and the rich and turned it into a place where the poor and the powerless now had a chance. 1959, the Cuban Revolution, following in the tradition of those revolutions of the 18th century that I'm talking about. Our independence was also revolution, starting in the 1930s with what they call the 1930s riots, where the people of the English-speaking Caribbean, from Jamaica and Barbados in the north to Guyana and Trinidad and Grenada in the south, rose up and threw off the yoke of colonialism. Freedom, freedom. Or a revolution also. And so the Cuban Revolution was not just about a few men going on an expedition. The Cuban Revolution was about the question of freedom and liberty. So was the Nicaraguan Revolution and the Grenadian Revolution of the 1970s. It was about people of the Caribbean doing as like the people of the 13 original colonies that became the original 13 states of the United States, crying out and rising up for freedom. What do they have in common? The Cuban Revolution, the Canadian Revolution, the Nicaraguan Revolution, the French Revolution, the American Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, the Bourbese Revolution of 1763. What do they have in common? It's about ordinary people living under the yoke of oppression, rising up and saying, we want to be free and we will be free. That's what all those revolutions have in common. I am coming to this status quo business. America today is the product of the American Revolution of 1776. When America declared independence from Britain, took up arms and rose up and formed the American nation, which is today the greatest military nation on earth. The Jacobins in France rising up. C.L.R. James was to write that famous book, The Black Jacobins. He's saying, just as the Jacobins in France rose up for liberty, so Toussaint Louverture and Dessalines and others rose up for freedom too, and he called them the Black Jacobins. The Bourbese Jacobins, led by Kofi and Akrabe and Atta and others. The American Revolution, the French Revolution, the Cuban Revolution. The Cuban Revolution is part of a revolutionary tradition that includes the United States of America and Guyana. So when my president in 2026 talks about the status quo in Cuba, he has demonstrated he has a poor sense of history, a poor sense of identity. Just as Jagan got it wrong in 1956, Irfan Ali got it woefully wrong. The American developed its own political system. The French developed its own political system. They're not the same. The French Constitution, the American Constitution differs. Haiti developed its own system. Cuba developed its own system. Guyana developed its own system eventually. The Grenadian from 1979 to 1983 developed their own system. One can argue from where we sit or stand with the political systems of each of these countries. The contestation of the systems. But when you're talking about the status quo of a place like Cuba, it goes deeper than the political system. Cuba is a sister. Cuba is a sister. When the Cubans, after we normalized relations with Cuba in 1973, I'm going back to 1973 now, because just as we are signing the Treaty of Chaguaramas, Burnham and Manley and Williams and Barrow are normalizing relations with Cuba. Because you see, the world that was not created for us excluded Cuba. And those four leaders of those four countries decided in 1973 that they are now going to include Cuba because Cuba is family, the family that Black Stalin is talking about. Burnham, by that time, is beginning to call himself a Marxist-Leninist. Eric Williams never gave himself a label. Errol Barrow never gave himself a label. Michael Manley calls himself a democratic socialist. But all of them had one thing in common. Despite their different attitudes to the isms and the schisms, they had one thing in common. They believed in a Caribbean identity that is grounded in our shared history. Whether we came from Africa, whether we came from India, from Madeira, from China, or whether we are indigenous in the sense that we came to this Caribbean before indigenous people. Our shared history. And their attitude to Cuba was not based on the Cuban political system. It was based on the fact that Cuba is family. We got comfort. The Eastern Caribbean, they got Shango. The Jamaicans got pop. The Cubans got the Yoruba, Orisha, Santeria. The Haitians got it all. Identity, identity. And so when my president goes to America and said the status quo of Cuba must go, I condemn him. I don't care about Ali's politics. And I'm not responsible for his politics. But I'm asking Ali, what is the difference between the status quo in Guyana and the status quo in Cuba? If he's talking about the political status quo, I challenge him. Show me where the political status quo in Cuba is any less in terms of quality than this political status quo in Guyana. I'm saying the cultural status quo, we are all the same. And if Ali is saying the political status quo in Cuba is bad, I am saying, Mr. Ali, look Guyana in the face, the Guyana that you preside over, the Guyana that you are dragging into the mud. Tell me whether the status quo that you are building and presiding over in Guyana is any better than the status quo in Cuba. That's what I want you to answer. I don't care about your politics. I'm fighting your politics. I've always fought it and will continue to fight it and encourage our people to fight. But you don't go and wash your mouth on Cuba and the status quo there and ignore the fact that your status quo here is probably worse than the one in Cuba. If they don't have free and fair elections in Cuba and you figure that is so, then say so. But look yourself in the eye and say whether you are not the product of rigged elections in Guyana. And if the status quo in Cuba must go, the status quo in Guyana must go. Talk to me tonight. And I'm talking to you because I could talk to you. You see, I have taken the view that we are in the presence of a changing of the world order. The world order of the post-Second World War is being replaced by this new world order led by the United States. History marches on. Guyana has no control over what America does. I grant that. And I think as small nations, we have to be cognizant of that. We have no control of what the US does. I am of that view. If we could stay out of the political contestations on the global stage, then we should stay out. I've argued for what I call a neutralism on these matters because we don't influence them. And we ought to be conscious of our place as small societies. With no leverage, we don't have nuclear weapons, and so we cannot influence anything in any deep and fundamental way. So I just want to put that. And so when we are crafting a foreign policy, our foreign policy has to take note of our history. It has to take note of the history of the world, our place in that world. Burnham, Manley, and Williams and Barrow faced that difficult question in 1972-73 of what to do with Cuba, which America had deemed a rogue state. And they took the position that whatever the status quo in Cuba, Cuba is our brother, is our sister. We come on the same ship from the same place. And we must pull one common intention for our children. The PPP of today has no backbone. Cuba, whatever is status quo, and there are many of us who disagree with the status quo in Cuba if the status quo is the one-party state. We disagree with the one-party state. All right. But talk to me, Ali. Isn't it the one-party state in Guyana that you are presiding over? Everything is about the PPP. Look at the parliament. The speaker is PPP. The deputy speaker is PPP. And you are telling Cuba about status quo and one-party state. You have a one-party state there. You control the executive. You control the legislature. You control who goes into the judiciary, who is acting, who is not acting. You have no moral authority to wash your mouth on Cuba. You see, you are listening to me carefully where I'm going with this. The debate over the Cuban system, I'm not getting into that. Because I have studied political systems, and all of them, from the American system to the Cuban system to the European systems to the Guyanese system, all of them are flawed. But when you are going to single out Cuba, not the US, I understand why the US is singling out Cuba. I have no control over that. Why my president is singling out Cuba? First of all, Cuba is family. Look at what Cuba's done for us. Human, not political, human. Doctors. When we couldn't afford doctors, and Cuba couldn't afford doctors because they were poor, just like us, but they provided human assistance to us as a sister, as a brother. I don't care. America will always see Cuba in the way it is seen Cuba because they have a history of antagonism. The Americans and the Russians almost went to war in 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis. So there's a history between Cuba and the United States. I am not surprised that the United States, in this emerging new world order, is taking a hard line against Cuba. But I'm asking, why is Guyana taking a hard line against Cuba? That's my question here tonight. And President Ali saying, because of the Cuban status quo, and I'm asking again, how is the Cuban status quo? How is it? In essence, any different from your status quo in Guyana? In fact, I'm making a value judgment that your status quo is even more rotten than the Cuban status quo. The Cubans don't have 58% poverty. Talk to me. You are presiding over 58% of poverty in this country, and you are telling me about the Cuban status quo. I hear them talk about realism in international relations. I know something about international relations. I studied it. I taught it. And the realism is that each country looks after its interests. All right, fair enough. America is looking after its own interests in relation to Cuba. That's realism. And the argument is Guyana is looking after its own interests. Ask, what is Guyana's interest? I know what the American interest is. What I'm asking is, what is Guyana's interest? This realism that I hear some chatty talking about. Tell me, what informs this realism by Guyana? What is Guyana's interest? What is Guyana's interest as far as foreign policy is concerned? What is Guyana's interest? I heard them talking about it on the BBC thing. And that BBC story and so on. Again, the status quo. The PPP government objected to Norton being on that BBC panel. They objected to Anand Prasad, the Stabrook News editor, being on the panel. They said they're partisan. But they agreed to Azadin Mohammed being. Well, Azadin Mohammed isn't he partisan? Why you agree to Azadin going? Because they feel they can beat up Azadin. They objected to Terence Campbell going. Because they know they can't beat up on Terence Campbell. They know they can't beat up on Anand Prasad. They know they can't beat up on Aubrey Norton. So they objected to them going. They said they're partisan. Well, isn't Azadin Mohammed partisan? Why you wanted Azadin to go on the BBC thing? But you feel that you can beat up on Azadin. And when Azadin smelled the rat and said, I ain't going to fall, you beat up on me. I don't know nothing about you all foreign policy and Cuba and so on. I ain't in the league yet. He sent his lieutenant, Sarabo, Tabitha. You tell me if that's not deviousness on the part of the PPP. If the BBC was saying, look, we want the political status quo to come there and the status quo from civil society. The political status quo is the PPP, 36 seats, Rabin seats, some of them, Win, 16 seats, APNU, 12 seats. But suddenly APNU is not part of the status quo. Win is, because you all feel that they can beat up on Win. You're not serious. You're not serious. You're trying to score political points on these issues. So when the issue of foreign relations came up, and Brother Ashley was waffling, and they went to Win and they went to the others, and the moderator kept asking the question, is the PPP being ungrateful to Cuba? Ashley waffling. And they said the others waffle too. But the others not running the country. Cuba, PPP running the country. Let me say here tonight, David Hines speaking for himself, the PPP is damn ungrateful on the Cuban issue. There's nothing the Guyana government can do to stop what America wants to do to Cuba. There's nothing. And if President Ali is saying that, I'm with you. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do. I am with you on that. But by God, some self-respect. Could at least shut your mouth. Shut up. Give the standard answer. Cuba is my brother. Cuba is my sister. The people of Cuba are my brothers and sisters. And at the end of the day, what happens in Cuba ought to be the business of the people of Cuba. At least you could say that. The status quo in Cuba must go. The status quo in Guyana got to go to. Got to go to. You're going to be crying out about Jagan tomorrow. And what Jagan built in terms of fraternal relations with Cuba, you could not even say Cuba is my brother. Cuba is my sister. I may not agree with the status quo in Cuba. I cannot stop what the status quo in America wants to do with the status quo in Cuba. But Cuba has been good to Guyana and the Caribbean. Don't tell me about political realism and that your foreign policy is driven by your interests. I'm with that. That's what the realism is. But I want you to tell me what is driving Guyana's realism. That you're telling me political realism from a Guyana standpoint must mean throwing your friends under the bus when you don't have to. Then the PPP is going to throw the rest of Guyana under the bus too to save its ass. The Cuban question is not an easy question. If America is going after regime change in Cuba, and you're asking Guyana, where do you stand on regime change in Cuba? That's a difficult question for Guyana. I know. I am not saying it's an easy question. I'm not saying that it's an easy question. I know it's a difficult question. It's a ticklish question, as we say in Guyana. But the least you could have done is to close yourself in a national position or a regional position instead of you and Kamala going and genuflecting and abandoning the Caribbean position that Burnham and Barrow and Manley and others, Eric Williams, took 50 years ago. You could have come to your own parliament and get us there. Ask us what to do. I'm not advocating to be hostile to America. That would be suicidal for our government to take a hostile position to America. No, it's suicidal. Nobody has to tell me that. I know that. And I wouldn't advise my government to do that. But it's equally suicidal to abandon your brother and sister, your blood brother and sister. We come on the same ship from the same place. It's equally suicidal to do that. I shall not, will not advise you to fight America on the Cuban question, but I will also not advise you to abandon, from a moral standpoint, our brothers and sisters. If the bombs begin to rain down on the Cuban people as they're raining down on the people in the Middle East, Ali, Jadio, and the PPP government will be responsible for the blood of the Cuban people that will be shed there. I'm talking black tonight. Stay out of the fight. I'm with you there. Do not foolishly go and antagonize America. I'm with you there. But there is a line that must be drawn. It's a line that must be drawn. But you see, when you participate in the killing of 400 African and more of your own people, then you have no value for the Africans and non-Africans in Cuba. When you slaughter your own people, using state power in Guyana, slaughtering your people economically, politically, and otherwise, then you care not about the people of Cuba or anywhere else. All you care about is the PPP survival. If the status quo in Cuba is rotten, the one in Guyana is 10 times more rotten. At least the status quo in Cuba ensures that the Cuban people are not living in poverty. The status quo in Guyana is doing everything to ensure that the Guyanese people are living in poverty. Talk to me, because I represent a part of Guyana too. And I could talk to you. I'm laying it out there tonight. I'm not saying it's easy. If you were asked to go along with regime change in Cuba, you have to dance your way. You're a small country. You can't do nothing to change that. But you must hold the line when it comes to our collective dignity. The Americans they're not foolish. They understand the country that you're in. They understand it. Just as they understood the country that Eric Williams and Barrow and Burnham and Manley were in. But after all that we've done to survive a hostile world, you just act in this shameless way? And you didn't have to do that. That's my point. You didn't have to go there and wallow your mouth on Cuba. I happen to disagree with the one-party state in Cuba. I disagree with it. I disagree with the single dominant party in Guyana. Because although we're not a one-party state, we have a single dominant party in Guyana, which is not qualitatively different from the one-party system in Cuba. I disagree with the political system in Cuba, the one-party state. My party has never embraced that. But I recognize the value of family. And if we're talking about reforming the political status quo in the world, then all of us must come under the microscope. This PPP is so blatantly opportunistic. I think they will sell Guyana. They will rather remain in power over 3,000 square miles and give away 80,000 just to stay in control of 3,000. Are you understand what you're dealing with? Are you understand what you are dealing with? I have never seen a more opportunistic government than this one. And they don't have to be. But you see, the 30 billion barrels of oil, and they're hiding it from all you. They're telling you it's only 10 and 11 billion, it's 30 billion barrels of oil. And that's what they are concerned about. Sisters and brothers, sometimes we stray because we are caught up in the surface of things. I think I said earlier in this week that what the APNU has, the condition of the APNU, we had a setback, an electoral setback. But we are not diminished politically. And some of you all are getting into that nonsense. Instead of lifting us up so that we can continue to fight all kinds of nonsense, who too black, who too ugly. And that's where the PPP has driven us. And some of you all are acquiescing to it. While they go on the world stage and sell us out. We are going to continue to fight. All I can do is to try to bring to bear some knowledge, some reasoning into this matter. I understand the difficulty, the government, the PPP government, the Trinidad government, the Jamaican government. I understand the difficulty they're in. They don't have nuclear weapons. And they're asked to sanction something that our history stands against. I understand it. But come to your own nation and say, it's a difficult time. Let us all reason this thing through. And let's take a national cultural reaction. Not a stupid reaction. A national cultural reaction that takes into consideration our own history, our own place, our own survival. You see why people like me can't go on the BBC. Because this is what I will say to the BBC people. This is what Terence Campbell ought to have said if he had gone there in the BBC. We have to be creative. We don't have to be foolish. And go and take some anti-American position. That's foolish. But the alternative to that foolishness is not spinelessness. The alternative to that foolishness is not spinelessness. The alternative to that foolishness is a national cultural reaction that says we are small, we are vulnerable, but by God, we are civilized people too. I don't want the PPP to lead me anymore. I never did before. But after this sad performance on the world stage, where you couldn't bring to bear the collective, creative, intellectual tradition of Guyana, a Guyana that has given this world Cheddy Jagan and Fobbs Burnham, Sidney King, Walter Rodney, Clive Thomas, our dear departed Dr. Rupert Rupnarayan. We have given this world a Clive Lloyd with a bat in hand becomes majestic. We have given this world a Lance Gibbs with a ball in hand becoming the supreme maestro. We have given this world great athletes. We have given this world Martin Carter, A.J. Seymour, we have given this world civilization. We've given this world great athletes. My own countrywoman, June Marcia Griffith, running down the track, fleetingly fast, saying to the world, I come from the nigger yard of yesterday, leaping from the oppressor's hurt and the scorn of myself. From the world of yesterday, I come with my burden. To the world of tomorrow, I turn with my strength. And my strength is that once I'm on that track, and that gun goes off, badam! And I begin to run down that track and taking with me all the burdens of my history and saying to the world, I am somebody, we are somebody. We have given this world. They refer to Clive Lloyd as the great captain, carrying on his shoulders the burden of the Caribbean civilization, that we could govern ourselves. If we could win at cricket, and we won for 20 years as a Caribbean nation, saying to the world that we could govern ourselves and we could govern our thoughts. For President Ali, on the backs of all of that, to shamelessly prostrate when he didn't have to do so, betrays a lack of depth, a lack of appreciation for our history. And that is what saddens me and ought to sadden you all. You all better start fighting harder than we did yesterday, because we are in trouble. We are in trouble. We are in trouble. This ultimately is not about Cuba. This ultimately is about Guyana. Because our myopic, President Ali's myopic attitude to Cuba. Look at what the position they've taken on the Cuban doctors here. They say, well, it's the Cuban pull out the doctors. Well, if that is true and the Cubans are on record of pulling out the doctors, what do you expect them to do? They're pulling out their doctors because you have indicated that you don't want their doctors there anymore. What do you expect them to say? We are not fooled. We are not fools. Some of the other, you come in and tell us, well, oh, it's the Cuba who pulled the doctors out here. My brother parliamentarian, the Minister of Health, a pleasant chap, Frank Anthony. But Frank, do you really believe that we buy that nonsense that it's the Cubans who pulled the doctors? Of course they pulled the doctors, because you have indicated to them in private and in public on this question by being able to throw out your doctor. We shall still rise. We shall still rise. We shall still rise. The world is changing before our faces. The world is changing. Whether it's in the Middle East or here in our Caribbean, the world is changing in a blatant way. And as I said, as small states, there's not much we can do to stop that. There's not much we can do. You know, there is not. America wants to blast the world apart as it is showing. It can do that. We can argue it's wrong. We can argue the way in which they're doing it. But the realism that they're talking about is that they're going to have their way. That is what power does. So we ought not to get caught in that argument, you know. It's unnecessary. Excuse me. It's unnecessary. But we have pride too. We have dignity. American I am. We have pride. We have dignity. We are going to eventually make it to the other side of the river. It's not a bright day, but we have encountered difficulties before.